All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Maureen Morse. I'm the chairperson of the Libbytown Neighborhood Association. Today's date is October 20th, 2021, and we are hosting our Libbytown Neighborhood Association monthly meeting. And we are being joined by the at-large candidates for City Council and School Board. So as we always do, we'll start off our meeting with introductions. And it's easier on the Zoom for me to just call on people to introduce themselves. I will start. Maureen, I live on Whitney Avenue. And then I'm just going to go clockwise from the top of my screen. So I'll start with Stuart.
Yes, I'm Stuart Tisdale, and I live in Deering Center on Maple Street.
Excellent. And I should mention, I'm obviously going to be allotting everyone time to formally introduce yourselves to our candidates, so you don't have to feel the need to say too much in the beginning. So next we'll go to Brandon.
Hi everyone, Brandon Mazer, candidate for at-large, and I am out on the East End.
Excellent. Brandon, if you're able to speak more directly into a microphone, it's a little bit hard to hear you, just to let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then we'll go to Roberto.
Hello, I'm Roberto Rodriguez, and I live in North Deering on Sanborn Street. That's right behind Lib's Ice Cream.
Excellent. Zach? You're on mute, Zach.
Zach Berowitz, Hunter Street.
And we'll go to Fred.
Fred Dillon, Davis Street, and the secretary for the LNA.
Nyla.
Hi, I'm Nyla Biliu, and I live on Marcus Street in downtown.
Next, go to Eric.
Eric Anderson and Haley Mom. We live on Douglas Street.
And next we'll go to Ryan.
Hi, I'm Ryan. I'm here on behalf of Travis Curran. I live on Fisher Street in North Deering.
Excellent. Next is Susan.
Susan Feckety. I live on Bolton Street.
Maeve.
I'm Maeve Christrang. I live on Bolton Street, and I'm vice chair of the Neighborhood Association.
Next we have Sam.
Good evening, Sam Zager. I live on Prospect Street.
Excellent. David.
Hi, I'm David Packard. I live in South Portland, but I'm here representing PK Realty Management. We own and manage a couple buildings in the Libbytown neighborhood, Westfield Street and St. James Street.
Sally.
Sally Farnath, my neighbor. I live in on Delaware Court. My neighbor Dorothy Gronell sent me this link.
Well, welcome. Elaine. Oh, maybe Elaine's not here.
Elaine Isahar, Sanborn Street in Portland.
Welcome. Alex.
Hey, Alex Merrill. I live on Craigie Street. I'm also representing Travis Curran, who, by the way, lives on Emerson Street on the East End.
John.
Hi, John Delcourt. I live on Francis Street.
We have Nick.
Nick Sicaro. I live on Whitney Avenue.
And Caroline.
Hey, I'm Caroline. I live on Huntress Street.
And Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul. I live on Hemlock Street.
Excellent. Welcome, everybody. So I think we're going to get right to it.
Forget Todd, I think. We had Todd as well. He came in late.
Oh, are you here, Todd? I don't see him.
I am here.
Oh, there you are. You popped in the middle. All right. I think that's everyone and is anyone else here who didn't have an opportunity to introduce themselves? Okay. So we can start right off. I figured if every person is able to introduce themselves within 3 minutes in order to give some time for Q&A, just sort of, I guess, an elevator pitch, if you will, for your platform, what you're hoping to accomplish, you know, if elected to city council or school board. And then we'll open up the floor to questions that anyone may have who's joining us today. I guess we'll start with City Council, and I'll go the opposite way that I went for introductions. So the first person, I'm not sure if John or Ryan are planning on speaking for Travis Curran.
I was planning on speaking for Travis.
Okay, so Ryan, if you want to start, I can put 3 minutes on, and if you want a 30-second warning, I can give it to you.
Sure, yeah, I'll keep it relatively short.
I'll do
and sweet.
this.
Okay, great, awesome.
All right, so let's see, timer. All right, go ahead.
Okay, cool. Hi, everybody. I am not Travis Curran, in case you haven't figured that out yet. Travis had a last-minute emergency, so he couldn't attend this evening. So I am here as his good friend and also his treasurer, full disclosure, to represent him and tell you all how I think he's great and how you should think he's great as well. So my name's Ryan. I currently am on the Charter Commission. I represent North Deering Center, and Riverton. And I support Travis for a variety of reasons. First, he's an amazing person. He's a working class guy. He's a real world committed to listening kind of person. He advocates for affordable housing. He supports workers and renters. He's a server at Main Craft Distilling. He's a regular working class person. I think that's, in my perspective, an uncommon in a lot of municipal politics, state politics, federal politics. So he's not affiliated with any interest groups or political organizations. And what I really like about Travis is that he recognizes that both renters and homeowners face challenges in Portland right now. I think oftentimes it's one way or the other. Travis sees that, yes, people have high property taxes, and that's an issue. That is something that people are facing a hardship right now, particularly seniors. He also recognizes that rent is really high, and Airbnbs are taking up blocks of our neighborhoods with illegal hotels, essentially. He's been unhoused. He understands the complex issues surrounding the unhoused community, supports the smaller shelters referendum, opposes the large shelter on the edge of town. He's a listener, and I'll keep it short and sweet because I'm not actually the candidate, but I hope you join me in supporting him, and I'm happy to talk about the great things about Travis or any questions that you might have.
You're muted, Maureen.
How many years have we been doing this? All right. So how many decades have we been on Zooms? So the next city council candidate going counterclockwise is Roberto. So I'll set 3 minutes on the clock and you can go ahead.
Thank you, Maureen. My name is Roberto Rodriguez, and I serve on the Portland School Board. I've been on the school board for the last 5 years. 2 of those years, I was chair of the board. The reason that I'm running for city council is pretty much the same reason that I'm serving on the school board. When we look at the reasons why our students and families are not able to thrive in our communities, ultimately we arrive at large societal issues that the schools cannot solve alone. And so I'm a strong believer that policies should have broad impact and that we should look at issues from a systemic point of view and hold individuals accountable. And my view of running in the council race is looking for a platform that allows us to have a broader conversation about these issues. What I've experienced over the last 5 years as I've engaged in the work is people that are passionate about this city, people that are passionate about public education, and people that are passionate about equity. We have centered our comprehensive plan, the Portland Promise, by centering the goal of equity. And all of our decisions, whether it be from our curriculum to our personnel, to our budget allocation of resources, are always aligned with that comprehensive plan. We've created reliable systems of accountability by constantly going back to that comprehensive plan. That same work ethic and that same reliable use of systems of accountability is what I hope to bring as value to the city council. On top of that, by engaging in the schoolwork, I've been able to have a deep, meaningful connection to our community. Our schools are what fundamentally connects us as a community. And by being a volunteer in the classroom, by coaching athletics, by going to community meetings and neighborhood association meetings, and definitely running on the board and the extension of that, you again, you become fundamentally connected to the community. And it's been a privilege so far on the school board, and I would be honored to be on the council. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So next for City Council would be Brandon.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Brandon Mazer. As I've been doing doors and meeting with neighborhood groups, the question is often asked, why are you running? And I really got it down to two reasons. One, I truly love this city. I grew up here. My grandfather was a Portland firefighter. I have fond memories of going to Deering Oaks and feeding the ducks, eating at the village, and just seeing this city continue to grow and expand. The second reason I decided to run is, as many of you may know, I'm currently the chair of the Portland Planning Board, and I think I'm in a unique position to bring some subject matter expertise to the council to help address what really is going to be I think the main focus for the city over the next 3 to 5 years, and that's affordability and housing. We need to really take a hard look on how we can bring more affordable housing, more family housing to the city. During my time on the planning board, I've seen good development and bad development. I've seen what's working and what's not working to incentivize and get affordable housing built. The other piece of that that is tied closely to it is public transit. We really need to start working on our public transit to make it more reliable, more usable, longer hours and that ties directly into affordability. If we don't have to continue to build parking for housing, that can be housing. So I really believe my expertise and my experience will be an incredible asset to the council as we move forward, and I would be honored to serve as your at-large city councilor.
Thank you so much. And then we have Stuart.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. As I said before, I'm Stuart Tisdale, and Portland is my hometown, too, as well. I was a kid here, I was a student here, a parent, a grandparent, and now I'm a senior. I'm the guy who still lives in the town where he went to high school. I can remember when, many of the problems that plague us didn't exist. So that perspective assures me that they need not exist. My sole goal in running for this office, and it becomes clearer to me as each day of this campaigning goes on, and I realize what a life stealer it is, that I want to serve my hometown. I have the insight from long experience that will let me do that well. I've learned from being a public defender in Portland courtrooms that good representation makes all the difference. I've lived the key words of the Pledge of Allegiance, justice for all. I've learned from my experience as a high school history teacher for many years that social tensions, if they are harnessed by collaborative, creative leaders open to the possibility, can become creative forces for change. Communities can experience golden ages when they value each other and have a shared sense of purpose. My concept of what makes a good government comes from my classroom experience. Just as a teacher must meet all the needs of the students, good government should meet all the needs of the people to the extent practicable. But because given limited resources, compromises are always part of the deal, government also has to explain outcomes to people in a way that they can accept as fair, because nobody can be expected to react well or accept unfairness. That's a little bit about me and where I'm coming from. If you have any I'll be happy to answer more specific policy questions later. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have Nyla.
Thank you, Maureen. My name is Nyla Biliu, and I am running for the at-large seat on the Portland School Board. I will keep it short as well because I don't want to take too much time from the candidates that may need this much time a lot more than I do. I am a first generation immigrant who is a proud alumni of the Portland public school system. I went to Riverton Elementary School, Lincoln Middle School, and Deering High School. And I honestly and really just want the opportunity to utilize that experience that I had as somebody that was impacted by school board policy, somebody who had the experience of really understanding that that student side and the impact side of those policies. And I really just wanted to bring that experience to the table and have an opportunity to represent that experience and have an opportunity to speak from the viewpoint of that experience. I'm also a very dedicated community organizer, and there's a lot of spaces I've been, my work previously as a SNAP educator has also given me a lot of insight to children's learning that I know I will be able to utilize if I, or when I do get elected. Yeah, I mean, and I've lived in Portland for a long time, grew up in Portland. I think I have a unique voice that Portland hasn't really had, that has not been represented on the school board. And I really want to represent the BIPOC students and really give them an opportunity to see themselves lead and to see themselves be represented in policy that really impacts their day-to-day.
Thank you. All right, so now I think we should open up the floor to some questions. I would ask that if anyone has a question for any of the candidates that they use the raise hand function, and I will try my best to call on people in the order they put their hands up, I guess. So if anybody has a question, feel free to raise your hand. So Fred, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question for Roberto about the, I don't know if you'd call it a controversy, but the recent brouhaha, I guess, over Councillor Chong's open letter from a couple of weeks ago about the efforts by the school department. And I know you're running for council, but just to kind of get some clarification on how you think that played out and whether or not some of the concerns that Councillor Chong voiced were credible or legitimate about the school department's efforts to increase diversity and address, sorry. So yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. Is that question clear enough for you?
Yeah, I think so. I'll try to answer it as I understand it, but if I'm not addressing it, maybe you can flag it for me. I think that fundamentally what Councillor Chung was raising as a concern is what we all share, which is outcomes that represent outcomes in achievement, outcomes in participation in rigorous material like AP classes and college credit classes, involvement in co-curricular activities, and etc., including also discipline, out-of-school suspensions. In all of these areas, you find inequities where students of color, students who come from low socioeconomic backgrounds, those are represented by free and reduced lunch in the schools. And then also students that are part of our special education population, and of course our ELL students. So when you see outcomes where these groups are overly represented compared to their percentages in our enrollment, you have to acknowledge that our work falls short because we haven't produced equitable outcomes. However, I would push back a little bit on his on what he claims is our inaction I think we have a lot of achievements to be proud of and a lot of work that we've done, like I said earlier, that's aligned with the comprehensive plan. And that includes an increase of resources. So more people, right? More staff to help with our students. We've talked also about redoing our policies, particularly our discipline policies, and trying to move away from a punitive discipline philosophy and more towards a restorative one that facilitates a building of community, right? Because we connect with a student and their whole experience, not just who they are, as a seat in a classroom or as a space in a classroom or as a number in an enrollment sheet, which is why we don't look at budgets as the bottom line of how many people we have in the schools. We look at it from the needs that our families have, and then we build our allocation of resources based on that. So I would say that, yes, we've done a lot of things to advance that goal, but the outcomes remain inequitable. And like I said, why I'm running for council, because these issues are large societal problems that the schools cannot solve alone. We're talking about affordable housing, right? We're talking about access to high quality healthcare. We're talking about equal wages, equal opportunity. Naila excites me as a candidate for a school board for exactly the reason that she mentioned. She's a student, a product of our schools with lived experiences that is going to be able to share that perspective and make decisions for our schools.
Yeah, it occurs to me. Sorry, it occurs to me I probably should have asked Naila that question as well. So, and I don't know if I can have a two for Maureen, but maybe Naila could address that as well. Sorry.
Yeah, I can definitely chime in. I've honestly haven't really been paying attention to some of the online stuff just because I just need it personally for my personal health. I just kind of stayed away from it. But I think, yeah, I think it's really about trying to create that opportunity to really hear from the people that are experiencing these issues, from the people that are going through it, because that's really how we authentically know how our policies are impacting them, right? We can make all the policies we want, but if we can't really gauge the impact, if we don't have data to understand how are these students actually dealing with our policy, how are they responding to our policy, to our decision making and the way that we're trying to represent them, how are they and I'm somebody that really speaking to the AP opportunities, I was somebody that where the system literally stopped me from having that opportunity. I had I had guidance counselors that were telling me that I wasn't good enough. And there were times where I had to really take the initiative to push back on them and be like, no, I'm a junior in high school. I have not taken any extracurricular classes or any classes that would advance my education. I am good enough to take at least one honors class. I shouldn't have to fight for my own space in elevating my education, right? I shouldn't have to literally have a whole friction conversation with my guidance counselor just to get her to see that I'm serious about my education enough to get to that next level. So we have to create a safe space, not like Roberto said, societally, a safe space where students feel comfortable enough to demand more, and they're given the opportunity to be seen as, okay, you're doing great in this math class. How about let's take you to the next level, and seeing that there's potential there, and not just basing it on, who is the most visible child, which a lot of times is going to be white children because their parents have the resources and the capacity to push them that way, right? Whereas my mom doesn't understand the educational system. She doesn't understand how school works. So she's not constantly pushing me to do better and to ask for more. So we have to create a system that is seeing these kids and is pushing them to do more, right? And is pushing them to, instead of being a barrier and saying, no, I don't think you're ready for that, or no, I don't think you're you have the capacity to really to really take in that work right now. We have to create a process where they can step into and just say, okay, I think I'm ready for that next level math class. I think I'm ready for that AP class now because I've taken 1 or 2 or 3 honors classes. So for me, I think it's not about the divisiveness. It's essentially about how are we prioritizing these kids and the real lived experiences that they have. And those real lived experiences a lot of times are going to go against some people's behaviors. They're going to go against some people's beliefs. They're going to go against the way some people feel. Like if somebody is pointing out that you're maybe racist, or that, you know, you're creating an unsafe situation, an unsafe environment for these Black kids, that is you being a part of the system now, you know, imprinting more, or not imprinting, but you're creating a barrier for those people. So you as a person, you now have to address that, because you're in a position of decision making that impacts these people's experiences and their day-to-day. So now we have to create a system where you as a policymaker will have to change that behavior, or you'll have to, you know, really go into a process where you can see that student, or you can see that student's experience, because that's who you're here to represent, not yourself or your own beliefs. I hope that that answers.
It was great. Thank you. Thanks a bunch. Thanks.
So I see that Zach has his hand raised, so I will put the floor over to Zach.
It's a question mainly for Brandon, but as far as I'm concerned, any of the candidates can jump in on it. It's an essay question, but that means the question is sort of in the form of an essay. So I'm going to read it out. You said that housing and public transportation are priorities of yours, and they are priorities that I share. As chair of the planning board, the planning board made several recommendations in phase 1 of the revision of the land use code in the areas of parking, signage, formerly known as signs, and in-law apartments, also known as accessory dwelling units, for phase 1 of the recode. These recommendations were expanded upon by the City Council. And given the dire need for more housing and the lackluster state of public transportation, do you think the planning board recommendations fell short, exceeded expectations, or got it about right?
Thanks, Zach. Interesting question. The way that recode, which I think is one of the most important things that is happening in the city right now, we're currently in phase 2. Phase 1 was always supposed to get it into a spot that was more organized and not very substantive in changes. My disappointment with phase 1 is how long it took. So in terms of what we did, I would say we probably got it about right for what the goal of phase 1 was supposed to be, but it should have been done significantly faster, which has now led to a delay in phase 2, which is really where the analysis is going to start happening. We're looking citywide at the zoning code, what zones work, what zones aren't working, where can density be increased, where should density be decreased, what type of parking requirements should be required, where. So I think the ADU was incredibly important. Councilor Cook was instrumental in getting that pulled through, and at both the planning board, frankly, and at the council. Lowering the parking requirements, I think is helpful, but I think we need to do more in phase 2. And the signage really was something that had started even before phase 1 that easily got wrapped into phase 1. So take it or leave it, whether or not you like business signs or not, it's something that we were able to at least check the box off of cleaning up. But to answer your question directly, I think for phase 1, it got done correctly. It should have been done significantly faster.
All right. So I see that Eric and Haley have a hand raised. So I'll give it over to those guys.
Yeah, this is a question I think for all of the counselors probably. I ride my bike to work. I ride my bike to drop my daughter off at daycare. And I think Portland has the opportunity to be a great place to ride, but I often feel unsafe. And there have been a number of serious accidents lately where cars have seriously injured cyclists. And so I'm curious what the candidates think about the state of that, and what you think City Council could do to increase safety for cyclists and sort of allow people to use biking as a form of transit in the city.
I guess we can start maybe with Stuart and go down the line.
Okay. Well, listen, I can appreciate. I mean, you must feel like you take your life in your hands when you ride a bike, because I don't ride a bike for that reason. But also, there's just a lot of bad driving out there generally. No matter where you go, there's a lot of bad driving. I don't have a very elaborate fix for it, other than I would just tell the police to be on the lookout and to do the best they can at policing bad driving. If you have a bike lane, but the bike lane is in the street, I don't know why that's, personally, I don't know why that's helpful. One reason I wouldn't use the bike lane is because it's in the street. So I'm afraid I don't have any great insight for you.
All right, and next we'll go to Brandon.
Thanks for the question. I actually joined the Bike Ped Committee 3 or 4 weekends ago to do sort of the candidate and elected officials bike tour around the city, and it was frankly eye-opening. And to your point, there has been a lot of accidents. A couple of things that I noted. One, I think there should be a discussion whether or not the Bike Ped Committee becomes more of an official committee of the city. I think members of the committee differ on that, but I think on the planning board, when we're looking at developments, we often get recommendations or insights from certain committees, from certain departments from the city to help guide us. So I think making it an official committee could be helpful. The other thing that I think I realized is we have a lot of construction going on around the city. And part of the major developments, they need to submit a construction management plan, which deals with things like how are construction workers going to get in and out of the site? How is traffic going to get through certain closed streets? But that construction management plan is very car centric. And I think, we rode by down Western Commercial Street in front of the new VA hospital, and they hadn't anticipated bikes, frankly. So some of us sort of hugged the shoulder on the right side of the road. I know a couple of people, including John Hing, crossed the street and went into the bike lane going the wrong direction because they felt safer doing that. So I think adjusting some of the way that our current developments are being built could also help improve safety as well. So those are some of the quick thoughts I had at the top of my mind. I'm sure there's more, but that's what I had from, and I think the Bike Ped, I told this to some of, they should get the planning board members out there more.
Thank you. And we'll go to Roberto.
Thank you. Great. So I'll tell you a little bit about my biking or commuting experience. So when I moved to Portland, I was still working in a skilled nursing facility down in Scarborough and Pine Point. And at that time, I was living in Biddeford, so I used to commute on my bike. So, and part of that, by the way, was on Route 1 to go into Scarborough. Yeah, exactly. Talk about crosswinds and close ones. And then when I moved to Portland, I still wanted to commute, so I actually did it. I live in North Deering, so that's all the way down Washington, over the bridge of 295, down to Commercial, all the way over on the bridge, then get down to the Eastern Trail to get down into the marsh, and then down to Scarborough. And I did that for almost the whole summer. Didn't get hit, a lot of close calls. So I get the commuter's spirit, and I did that purposely because I did not want to drive my truck. So it was in a spirit of trying to just get away from the autonomous car. And so as far as what we can do, I'm game with creating a standing committee that looks at our not just our cycling accessibility, but our walkability and general accessibility. I just told you that I live in North Deering. Before I get all the way down there, I have to go through Allen's Corner. Talk about a nightmare. The neighborhoods, like the folks that live here would love for that to be a walkable corner that I can cross the street from here to whatever is going to be there, be it a dispensary or a Dunkin' Donuts. I don't know if you guys know there's going to be a dispensary going in there now. But you're risking your life to cross that street. And there's a middle school and an elementary school right down the street. So if there's a way to make that a standing committee and to make accessibility by not just bicycle, but by pedestrians the key, I'm game for that too. I think most people are.
Excellent. And I don't know, Ryan, if Travis has any official position on it. I don't want to put you on the spot, but.
No, absolutely fine. We talk every day, so I'm very well versed in it. We've talked about this before as well. And, you know, this is a great question, because infrastructure in our city is one of the biggest things the municipal government does. And it's one of the things that municipal government should do well. So a few things. We can't have them everywhere, probably, but one of the things Travis has mentioned is having protected lanes on pretty much every major corridor, not just a bike lane, but actually more of a protected lane. What that looks like, I'll defer to the experts, but really removing our reliance off of cars and vehicles. I think riding a bike is really brave of you, because I wouldn't do that. And shifting that to shifting our reliance from cars to buses and to bikes. I think another thing Travis has mentioned is working with the Bicycle Coalition. They're a fantastic group of people. And as a city councilor, I know one of Travis's strengths will be is listening to the experts and listening to the people in the room who do this stuff every day. People who commute like you every single day to work or wherever. And really just improving education on cycling safety more broadly. And just the layout of our city. We have a lot of one-ways. Those should have protected bike lanes. We have a lot of roads that really don't make sense, if you haven't noticed. You know, working with the groups in our city who do this every day, and commuters like yourself and that sort of thing. So that's what I've heard from Travis on it. I know he's a big advocate, and especially its relation to climate and things like that. So thank you for the question.
Excellent. All right, I see that Sam has his hand raised. So go ahead, Sam.
Sam, you're muted.
You're muted, Sam.
Sorry, I put my hand down. I forgot to unmute. Well, as I was just going to comment, as a bike run transit commuter of 24 years, I appreciate the last discussion. But I have a sort of a non-policy, more process question. Wondering if any candidates that wish to offer any some sort of influential or uplifting for your own heart or spirit book or work of art or literature, theater, something that has kind of helped you or it has influenced who you are and how you approach and see the world. So, and I realize that's a bit of an open-ended question, but and a different one than the policy ones. But interested in how people think and how people approach the world, or what sort of speaks to them.
And anyone who doesn't cite Kurt Vonnegut is instantly disqualified. Just kidding. Just kidding.
I think this is a judgment-free zone as far as art goes, but.
All right. So I guess Nyla, you'd be included in that as well, I assume. So why don't we start with you?
Ooh, I kind of feel a little bombarded with that one. Well, I am very, I am very into social justice. So probably, I love the documentary, The 13th. I think that's something that just gives really good information on the state of racial justice in our country. The New Jim Crow going on. The New Jim Crow. so what I've been reading lately for policy to help me is it's called I think it's called Black Food, White Appetite. I think it's what it's called. I will get you the actual name. But it basically is it's a book that just basically talks about anti-racist policy in the school, in education, especially K to 12 education, and it talks about the type of experiences that Black students go through and the type of policies that are best, like the type of policies that can best address the issues of uprooting anti-racism in the education realm or environment.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being brave and going first, because I would have been terrified.
Yeah.
I'm just going in reverse order from the last time. We'll go next back to Roberto.
Thanks. Great question. First of all, I love content, right? So I love reading podcasts, all the above audiobooks. I think in relation, I think something that has really had an influence in my public service, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Paulo Freire. I think that's been a really a book that we always go back to and reference. And I think for personally, growth-wise, I think as a young person, or rather as an adult, I began really interested in Puerto Rican history for pretty obvious reasons, and I've taken an interest from various aspects of it, both in indigenous history, learning of Taino Indians and migration from South America into the Caribbean, and all the way through colonization. And then specifically, post Spanish colonialism, when the American colonial status began. So that's been, there's a long list of books that I can reference, but that theme has been one that I've dove pretty deep into.
Excellent. Next will be Brandon.
Thanks, Sam. Great. I really like this question. And I'm going to sort of, I think, answer it sort of in three parts. In terms of a book, the first thing that my mind went to that I have on my shelf and I always pick up probably once every year or two is The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, who I think it's sort of a Native American take, and it's sort of, now I'm going to try to reach back, be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally, always do your best, and I'm blanking on the fourth, but I always go back to that and read it probably once every couple of years to remind me of how to proceed in all walks of life, my professional, my personal. But the arts in general, I appreciate fully. And frankly, through this COVID-19, the arts were, I think, brought to the forefront of how important they are to society as a whole. I'm on the board of Maine State Music Theater, and it's been a really tough couple of years for the organization, but it's also been an escape for people to get back into the theater. And it doesn't matter what the show is. I learned something. It can be a comedy, and you still learn something to take away. And then finally, sort of to Roberto's point, one of my COVID-19 goals, and I'm still trying to work through it, was to either read or listen on Audible to a biography of every president. I'm not even halfway through, but I'm slowly working my way through. I'm reading The Art of Power by Meacham, I think is what it's called, on Jefferson, and I'm listening. I've got like 45 minutes left on a recent biography on Nixon. So I'm jumping around and just trying to learn the good and the bad from our presidents. So probably a longer answer, but those are the worlds I'm in right now.
Thank you. And then we have Stuart. You're muted.
Lately, I've been reading rock autobiographies. It was and biographies too. But I like the autobiography. I'm reading Waging Heavy Peace, Neil Young. Robbie Robinson wrote an autobiography, and really interesting one is Greg Allman. It, there's a shocker at the end. But it's interesting to me to see how those guys found themselves in the right place at the right time. So that's not related particularly to being on the city council, but if you ask me what I'm reading, that's what I'm reading. I spend a lot of time listening to music, so I have favorites in that field too. But yeah.
Thank you so much. I don't have any other hands raised currently, so I actually have a question, if I could be permitted. A big issue in Libbytown and Portland in general is the current situation with our unhoused population and the new homeless shelter that is slated to be built in Riverton. And I was just hoping that each city council candidate could briefly give me their sort of feeling on what the best approach would be to help serve the unhoused population, whether it's larger shelters, smaller scale shelters, housing first, those kinds of things. So if you guys would be able to sort of give me in brief your feelings on that situation, starting where we ended with Stuart, we'll go back around, if that's okay.
I'm sorry. What was the question?
Sure. So I was just asking about what your feelings are about the unhoused, the homeless population in Portland, and sort of
Yes.
what the best way to move forward with serving that community would be.
Well, in terms of the referendum, this is a difficult, and I feel like one of those CIA analysts who says they have a 51% feeling about one outcome or a 48% feeling about another outcome. I'm not strongly certain of my opinion on this, but I have like a 60% feeling, 60% likelihood that the small shelter option will, in the long run, be the better choice. I say that because I read in the newspaper that Mark Swan said that he learned doing a small shelter in USM during the COVID epidemic that it worked out much better than he expected, and he now favors small shelters. And I also think that the ultimate solution has to be, unquestionably, it has to be a regional solution where the state steps in and carries the ball, because the problem is created across the state, and it's not fair for Portland, the Portland taxpayer in particular, to have to fund a solution for a problem that is caused all across the state, if not across the nation. So I'm looking forward. There's the Homeless System Redesign Initiative that was published recently that talks about 9 regional shelters. And that to me, that has to be the plan. That has to be the option. And I hope I would, if I were a counselor, I would use every instrument of advocacy at my disposal to make that happen as soon as advocacy could bring it to happen. And then that will leave, once the estate system is in place, that will leave Portland with a smaller population. And I'm also a smaller population to care for, so therefore perhaps not the need for the big shelter. And I realize people in the city have worked long and hard on that big shelter, and here I am coming in lately, Johnny come lately, and saying that I think a different option would be better. But I do think, with all due respect to all the hard work that was put into it, I do think that the small shelter would be the better option. But it's a difficult, complicated question.
Thank you. I'll go next to Brandon.
Thanks. I think no doubt, and I don't think many people would disagree, that housing first is by far the best option. However, that's not the easiest option or necessarily the fastest option. So if we're looking at the Riverside shelter compared to what's on the referendum for question A, B, or C, I support the Riverside shelter. I think when I first joined the planning board, we were talking about the zoning, where a shelter might go. Experts came and presented what a modern day successful shelter would look like. And we did that rezoning. And then we've gone through the process of having it go out to RFP, and the actual approved plan was brought forward. It has wraparound services. It has a 24/7 shuttle. It is within a quarter of a mile of public transit. It is going to be much, much better than Oxford Street. Is it a silver bullet? Is it the perfect solution? No, I'm not sure we have a perfect solution, but we don't have a plan or an approved plan for smaller shelters right now. And my fear is this idea of smaller shelters really means no shelter at all. And we have a population that needs help and assistance today. And there's nothing to say we can't also build small shelters. We have small shelters. I think we need to take a step back and understand this is an emergency shelter. We have small women's shelters, the Florence House. We have domestic abuse shelters. We have family shelters. There's nothing to stop private and public from doing small shelters. What I think the referendum is going to do is put a halt on fixing our issue with Oxford Shelter. So that's why I think the larger shelter is the better option today.
Thank you. Next to Roberto.
Thank you. So there's a lot of different parts of this issue that I think need to be addressed. Number one, that, as I said earlier, I'm a strong believer that policy should have a broad impact. So having an emergency shelter without having the broader conversation of how do we provide housing first, like that's really a shortcoming. At the same time, I've addressed a lot of the conversations around this issue from my perspective as a healthcare clinician, and the lack of discussion around how are we going to maintain continuity of care, how are we going to create reliable interdisciplinary team communication, and how are we going to try to provide the quality of care that is conducive to meet the needs of these folks. So I think that it's important that we shift the conversation to highlight that regardless of what happens on the referendum. Now, in terms of reliable process, we have options on the ballot that honestly, just based on the process that was taken to get there, I would feel hesitant to support. So out of the three options, I would be hesitant to stop the process towards the shelter, building the shelter on Riverside, for many of the reasons that Brandon stated, mostly that we don't have a backup plan. However, if we were starting this process from the start and we were including those voices of the folks that are most impacted by our decisions, we would probably be well on our way to a smaller shelter path. But given where we are right now in the dire need, I don't feel comfortable stopping that. And so I end up myself having to support option C on the ballot.
Thank you. And then Ryan, I don't know if Travis has an official position on this.
Oh yeah, he does. So this issue is very near and dear to Travis and myself, but particularly Travis. I mean, Travis was unhoused at one point in his life. He has slept at the Oxford Street shelter. He knows the unhoused community extremely well. Interacts with them on a daily basis. Travis supports the smaller shelter model. I know he voted A. I also voted A, but it's not about me, it's about Travis. And the reason is because throughout this entire process, unhoused advocates and folks in neighborhoods have been telling Travis, but also the public, also our city government, that the large shelter on the edge of town, which is not a mistake, is not the best model for our unhoused community. And just because it's been rammed through, yes, there's been research and stuff done, right? And there should be. It's an important issue, right? I'm not discounting the effort that's gone into it. I know Travis doesn't either. But the large shelter on the edge of town, a quarter mile away from the nearest bus stop. I live out there. Travis lives on Emerson Street, but I'll speak from my own perspective. I live out in Riverton. There's like one bus stop every quarter mile. Try walking a quarter mile in the snow in January. The other big issue that Travis has mentioned is when you get a criminal trespass order, things happen in shelters. You get in arguments. There's lots of things that happen in shelters. Like any place where a lot of people are crammed into a smaller space, right? If you get a criminal trespass order, you are not allowed to sleep in that shelter for a year. So if it's January and you don't have another shelter to go to, you don't have anywhere to go, you will freeze. This project has been pushed through before the voters had a chance to speak on it. In my opinion, it's not about NIMBYism. It's about, and I know Travis feels the same way, it's about doing what's right for the unhoused community. It's about Portland taking this challenge on as a city. It's not about shoving people off to the corner of town on the Westbrook line. That is not the right thing. So as you can probably tell, I'm passionate about it. Travis is very passionate about it. We talk about this all the time. And so I can hardly say that Travis supports smaller shelter model. I think his lived experiences speak to that incredibly well. That'll do it.
Thank you. I see that Eric and Haley have their hand up again.
Hi, it's me this time. So my question is another one that's sort of a perpetual Libbytown issue, which is what is the sort of like standstill in terms of the communication between the Department of Transportation and the city, well, mostly the Department of Transportation, like roadblocking the removal of the redundant ramps. And I was wondering if anybody had a vision for how to, like the exit 5, all of the unnecessary ramps, if anybody had a vision for how to advocate with the DOT and sort of work through a solution that is more than just no.
I suppose anyone who has an opinion can speak up.
I'm not sure I have a great answer. I think it may be better for Sam, frankly, working with our state officials. But I do know there have been some studies that show that land could actually be utilized quite well for some relatively dense housing. So I think just continuing to pound that, because we need housing, is one angle. I'm not sure I have a great answer on how to move some of the larger state organizations like the DOT off of something necessarily, but I do understand and have seen some of those studies.
Excellent. So does anyone else have any questions for any of the candidates? Oh. I have Fred's hand up again.
Sorry, one more. A couple of you kind of nibbled around the edges of it. What, and I guess this would be for all of the candidates. The one climate future plan that the city has. Where are you all on that? And any specifics in terms of what you would like to see happen first, and how that would be funded, and you know, what your priorities would be for that?
Did you want to call on people, or are you just asking if anyone has an opinion?
Oh yeah, or yeah, or do you want me to call in? I could do that as well, I guess, but yeah, go ahead, Maureen, because you're moderating, so sorry.
So I guess we'll start with Ryan.
Sure, yeah, I'll speak to this to my best of my ability. I'm not sure Travis's exact position on the One Climate Future Plan. I do know that he's very committed to doing everything he can, and especially when you talk about funding, finding alternative revenue streams to bolster programs like climate programs, whether that's increased fees for parking lots, things like that. So I don't want to get too much in the details because I feel like I'd be speaking for him and that would be inappropriate. But I would very much, knowing Travis, that he's going to support really most aggressive climate change plans.
Great, and next we'll hear from Roberto.
Thanks. So yeah, I think so. You know, the goals to lower our emissions, I think are key, right? And it's thinking globally and regionally, and I think that's certainly the approach that we want to continue to foster. Locally, you know, things we talked earlier about moving away from autonomous car use. You know, there's a lot of barriers to that. There's a lot of challenges to that, we should say. But certainly, we talked about making a goal of having accessible and walkable roads and neighborhoods. So that aims also to reduce our emissions because we start to move away from cars. And also, public transportation becomes an important piece of how we control our emissions. So thinking globally and how we solve these problems, I think is important. It's the same as before. The question about the off ramps. If our goal is to increase housing, then that's the goal, and then we center our decisions based on how do we advance that goal. And sure, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of side shoots, but we have to have a shared understanding of what the goal is, what we're trying to advance, and then the discussions of how we arrive there become simpler. But if we're aiming 5 different ways, it's hard to get aligned.
All right, I'll bring it over to Brandon.
Yeah, I think I agree with some of what Roberto was saying. I think the low-hanging fruit here is cars, increasing our electric charging stations. We're already requiring the conduit to be put into new developments, but really encouraging EV charging stations, electric bicycles, and decoupling parking from development. I think we should start exploring in certain areas of the city parking maximums rather than parking minimums. We can always build more parking garages, but we can't really build more roads, especially on the peninsula, and we can't get the cars in and out. So I think the low-hanging fruit there is really we can lower our emissions by lowering our reliance on cars, and it'll help also fix this chicken and egg situation whereby people say they don't use the public transit a lot of the reason because cars are so accessible and it's easier to just jump into your car and get around. So they don't utilize the public transit, therefore it's not funded enough, and therefore we have this vicious cycle of not having good, reliable public transit. So I think that's the other piece of the One Climate action that I really, really love and appreciate is that it's a partnership with South Portland, and I think we need more of that. To Roberto's point, we need the regional partnerships. One example I also use is we've got Rock Row out in Westbrook that is looking to have some serious housing, looking to have jobs out there, but they know those people that are going to be living and working out there are going to want to get into Thompson's Point or to the Old Port. And I think using a private-public partnership whereby they want to look at a rapid bus or a possible light rail, making sure that we're open to all ideas, whether they're within our borders or not.
Thank you. And then Stuart?
Yes, I too really love the model of regional decision making. That's the way to go in so many different issues. I love the aspirations. It's a very ambitious plan to make all city energy clean, renewable energy by 2050, to lower our greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by, I think, 2040. Those are high, ambitious goals. And I love the aspiration. You have to have the aspiration. If you don't have the aspiration, you'll never reach the result. But they are high aspirations. So, I mean, on climate change, individual communities have to take leadership. They can't hang back and say, well, we can't, why should we do this when so-and-so isn't doing that? Climate change requires leadership. And if a community like Portland and South Portland needs to kind of step forward and do a little bit more than other communities are doing, we have to do that. We have to do that. I'm not going to leave this planet to my grandson in a dirty planet. I'm not going to do that. So I'm in favor of the aspirations. People do get cynical, especially Mainers, they get cynical about high aspirations. So I think it would help to have some strong advocacy in the public, inspiring people about the worthiness of the cause, but also to try to build in some financial incentives to get people on board too. Somebody was telling me the other day that it costs $2,200 to get an electric car charger into his garage. So why not give tax rebates? Why not work out some sort of tax rebate scheme over the course of several years where they can recover some, most, or all of the cost of doing that? I mean, and that sort of thing might get people on board. money speaks to hard-headed Mainers, and so that might be a way to get the hard-headed Mainer behind an idealistic aspiration.
Thank you. And then I see, Sam, you had your hand up? It's now down.
I was just going to respond to the or offer something for the Exit 5 question, but in the interest of time, I'll and to Damon, who hasn't yet had a chance to participate tonight, I'll defer. Thank you, though, Maureen.
All right, Damon.
Hi, thanks everyone for joining us this evening. Sorry I'm a little late to the party. I'm curious, well, there's been a lot of referendums lately, and I think part of the reason for that is people feel frustrated by lack of power in the decision-making process. So I'm wondering if you could name, let's say, one specific thing you'd like to see changed about the way city government works to improve public participation in the decision-making process. Thanks.
Damon, just to clarify, is that a question for school board candidates and city council?
Sure, that's a question I'd love to hear from everyone. What's one specific thing you'd change to improve public participation in the decision-making process?
All right, start with Nyla.
Thank you. Hi, Damon. Sorry, can you clarify one thing I would change about the decision-making process? Is that?
Yep. So, what are ways that people can have more power over decision-making in the city, for example, by creating more ways for them to give input at public meetings or that kind of thing? Just ideas from people.
Yeah, I mean, for me, one of the biggest barriers for my mom to be present in a lot of in my education back then was language. So maybe having like a couple interpreters at each meeting would really take away from a lot of, would really kind of cut those barriers of people being able to be present and involved. Because if you don't speak the language, you can't show up, right? And I think that's a huge barrier in a community that has so much diversity and has so many people from different types of backgrounds. I think that can really reach more voters and reach a different demographic that we're used to. So I think providing resources for language access is one thing. And I think maybe even doing doing maybe even like Facebook ads. Like I think council members, or not council members, but like city council or school boards should have the opportunity or funds to advertise when they really need or when they really need crucial public comment, when they really need crucial engagement from the public, because I know that is also an issue. It's like trying to find those people to come to the meetings all the time. So maybe making it accessible via utilizing the tools that people use every day, the tools that people communicate with every day. So trying to find a way to utilize social media to advertise, like, hey, like maybe there could be an ad for like, on this day at this time, we're gonna be talking about this very important thing. And so everybody in Portland can see it. Everybody in Portland can see it pop up on their Instagram, their Snapchat, or their Facebook, just to further increase engagement and further have people be able to see like what, because I think that's also the issue right now with the Charter Commission too, is like getting people to come to these meetings and trying to get those voices in those rooms. And I think that would be a good opportunity to get more involvement.
Thank you.
Thanks for your question.
So next I'll go to Stuart.
Okay. I would be in favor of allowing any parents who have students in the Portland school system to vote for the school board, regardless of whether they had formal U.S. citizenship or not. So that would increase their participation in the school board process. I say that because as a teacher, I know there is no better ally in getting a student to do well than having the parents fully invested in what the students are doing. And if it would help the parents get invested in their students, in their child's education, to have a say in the school board, I would be in favor of that. And the fact that they may not have formal U.S. citizenship would not be a block to me, because the important thing, what we have to do here in Portland, is get the kids educated, and that would help us get the kids educated.
Thank you. Next to Brandon.
Thanks, Damon. I think one of the good things, if I can say that, that came out of COVID is this, Zoom. And I think we really need to be aggressive on having hybrid meetings. Earlier this summer, when we were all the time, not just when a council member or a board member can't make it. When we were looking on the planning board to go back live before the spike with Delta, it was the intention of the planning board to have all of their meetings hybrid. The engagement from the neighborhoods was great through this. You know, if you have kids and you're trying to get them ready for school the next day or get supper on the table, you can at least tune in and listen. And then when it comes up to the project, you can pipe in because council meetings, planning board meetings, I think the charter commission meetings, there are a lot of committee meetings, they go late. And we try our best to keep things moving. We try our best to stay on time, but it's always hard to judge how many people are going to speak from the public. The other thing that I want to explore is that in the planning board, we take public comment at the workshops. The council doesn't. And I get that there's a balance between time efficiency and keeping things moving. But once you're at a vote, then you're either trying to do amendments on the floor at the council or tabling, or it's not as efficient as I think if we got some of these comments out earlier from people, it would help with that dialogue. So those are the two things I would see. Let's try to figure out if we can make the technology permanent for hybrid meetings at all levels of city government, and taking comment at the workshop levels from the public in some form at the council meetings.
Thank you. Roberto?
Thank you. Damon, great question. We get asked this question and we try over and over to address it from the school board in multiple ways. But I'll start by saying this. I would first ask that we reframe the question and start by saying what prevents people from engaging in their local government. And when you get down to it, you're going to realize that it's a lot of the issues that we've been talking about over the last hour, right? That people are struggling to make ends meet. People are working long hours, multiple jobs. People are struggling to get their kids to and from schools. Schools are understaffed. Kids are on, like, it's a game, yo, and you're constantly running and running and running. And then you're like, hey, log into Zoom so we can be here till 10 o'clock. You can get 3 minutes to let me know what you think. Who wants to do that? It doesn't work that way. We gotta think about, like, what's the experience of the people that we're trying to serve, right? So when we talk about increasing accessibility, let's talk about improving the lives of the people in our community. Let's talk about building healthy communities, and then people will be engaged. But who wants to be engaged in a government that's making their lives so challenging? You don't feel represented. You don't have any trust in that. That's how you improve engagement, by building trust, by representing the people that are being most affected by your decisions at the time that you're making the decisions.
Thank you.
Can I say one more thing?
Oh, sure.
I have an example. Sorry. Because I have an example of how we've done this, or how we've tried to bridge this at the school board. Shortly after I arrived at the school board, we created the Family Partnership Advisory Committee. This is modeled after Portland Empowered Parent Manifesto, which is the way that they gather information from parents and give them feedback on how did they actively engage with their school, so that they can be active participants in their children's education. And so in this Family Partnership Advisory Committee, we meet once a month and we go over issues that the school board is going to be voting on the next week, and we get input. And that advisory committee is made up of representatives from each school. There's parents, there's social workers, there's a school board member. I've been there since the inception of that committee. And then there's also people from our multilingual and multicultural community, department. So we have interpreters. So all of these people are giving feedback to folks so that then we can represent it at the time that we make decisions on the school board. And I'm literally there, and I'm then hearing the way that these policies represent those decisions. I hear the conversations and then I see it in the product. So it works.
Thank you. And then Ryan, I don't know if you feel comfortable speaking to this.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Yeah. This is one of the things that I've talked with Travis about as well, among a lot of other things. And it, how do we activate the public, right? And it sucks that we have to kind of pick one here. I'm not saying that your question's bad, David. It's an amazing question, but there's a lot of different ways to do this, right? There's different ways to reach out to different communities. We live in an online world now, and one of the things, it sounds very simple, but if you just look at the city's website, basic web design and content on the city's website needs a lot of overhaul. And I've talked to Travis about this extensively, and he pointed it out to me, and we went through it one afternoon, and it certainly is hard to find things, anything from finance reports to when committees are meeting, those sorts of things. So I that would be probably one of the biggest ones that separates, I think, Travis from other folks. But I mean, I think all these are fantastic ideas. I think Travis would love all of them, but that's just an easy one, I think, that the city could do to cut down a lot of barriers for people. So, thanks.
Thank you so much. All right, does anyone else have a question? We are at about 8:18, so I think if no one else has their hand raised, I really appreciate all the candidates for at-large city council and school board coming out and talking with us tonight, and I found it very illuminating. If any of you guys want to leave your websites, your Twitter handles, your Facebook pages, this video will be published to the @LibbyTownNA page on Facebook, and it will be available on YouTube. So yeah, I appreciate everyone taking the time to come out, and we have a couple more items to discuss, but of course candidates don't have to feel like they need to stay for that. But thank you all very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this was great.
Thanks, appreciate it.